Hey friends, welcome back to the Invitation Podcast. This has been an incredible summer and we're diving back in. Fall's right around the corner. But whenever you're having the opportunity to tune back in, we're glad you're here. We've got some incredible episodes lined up. But because it's been a little bit for us, I'm going to kick things over to Phil so he can tie in the episodes that we've already covered and bring us up to speed because we've got a great one for you today.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Yeah, we covered a lot of ground and very little ground at the same time in season 1, right? So we did Genesis 1, 2, and 3, and we're able to cover some of the depths of what it meant for God to create the universe beyond just believing that.
Right.
We were able to dig into what it meant to be God's image, what it meant to be partners with God, and all sorts of fun stuff there. But we also, at the very end of season 1, were able to dig into the deep consequences of sin.
Right.
Beyond just the spirituality of sin, but the deep consequences of sin as well.
Not an easy topic.
No, not
but good stuff there.
But lots of good thoughts and lots of good ways to think about what is God inviting us to when we consider these passages and these thoughts that he presents in the Bible. And so in season 2, we will be moving at a much faster pace biblically as we explore different topics throughout Genesis and moving on through the Old Testament.
Right.
But we will also continue to try and strive for some of the same depth and application that we've done in episodes past. So we're glad you're here for it, and we're excited to dive in today into Genesis 4, where we'll look at Cain and Abel.
Yep.
Kyle?
Yeah.
Any sibling rivalry in your life?
Oh my goodness. Look, all you people out there with loving relationships with your brothers and sisters, good for you. Okay. Oil and water. My younger sister, there'll be a part later where this will become applicable. Lines were crossed. I was on the top bunk. She was on the bottom bunk. I don't know if you guys remember. This is going to age me. Some of our folks are going to remember this. The white tape recorder with the primary colors, the red and the yellow, right? And it had the mic on the side, right?
Yep.
Well, in one of my not so fine moments, I reached up to the top shelf and just kind of hucked that down, yeah. So anyway, I hope that you guys didn't chuck gigantic tape recorders at your sibling. I think I've since been forgiven, but we're still working that out. And there's probably more counseling dollars there, but
oh, man.
Enjoy that one.
Sure, yeah. I've got a little sister as well, and we really didn't get along for the first 10 years of her life. I was around 16, but it's funny what a driver's license did for a relationship and how quickly things patched up. But in all seriousness, like me and my sister have a great relationship now, but it certainly wasn't without some serious rivalry, even blood at times was shed in that relationship and heartache. But yeah, the hope here is, whether you're an only child or have many siblings, the hope here is that you can relate to rivalry and relate to the effects of that in your own life, but also we won't go fully down this road today, but sibling rivalry is a theme that carries on throughout the Bible.
Right.
So we've got Cain and Abel now. We'll have Jacob and Esau. We've got David being the runt of the litter before he becomes king. We even have some of the apostles being brothers.
Sure.
Simon and Andrew, James and John, and Jesus and his half-brothers have some rivalry going on in the Gospels. So this is actually something to not only pay attention to when it comes to Cain and Abel, but even wherever you might be in the Bible, it's worth paying attention to. Oh, this is what Cain and Abel introduced to the theme of sibling rivalry. I wonder how that's playing out in the part of the Bible that you might be reading yourself. So with that said, Kyle, I think it's time to go into the scriptures. Would you mind reading Genesis 4, verses 1 and 2?
For the record, Phil picked the smallest text Bible that you could possibly select. And clearly, this is better than the NLT. Some of you'll get that joke, some of you won't. It's okay. Whatever version you pick is just fine.
Yes.
everyone with the amplified version is back there. The message.
Except really loud if they're amplified. So,
Right. Yeah, well played.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Here we go. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1 through, was it just 1 and 2?
Just 1 and 2.
1 and 2. Adam lay with his wife Eve. Bow, chicka, bow, bow. And she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel.
Yeah, great. So there's not a ton here, but there is something kind of sneaky here in this passage that I want to point out. So with Cain, there's this announcement.
Fanfare.
With the help of the Lord, brought forth a man, right? And if you do remember, or whether or not you remember, in Genesis 3, there was this promise given to the woman. From your seed will come someone that will have enmity between you and the snake. Your inheritance will crush the snake's head, will bite your heel. So Eve actually has this kind of, fanfare, this announcement about, hey, here is Cain. And I've often wondered, and some theologians have wondered too, like, did she have the expectation that perhaps it's Cain? And this family style and expectation back in the patriarchal days of the Israelites would have certainly had favor on the firstborn son for all sorts of reasons.
As they should.
As says the two firstborn sons that have the microphone right now. And yet, how is it portrayed in this passage? Cain gets this announcement, oh yeah, there was Abel too.
And there's Abel.
So sorry for all you secondborns out there when it comes to this one. But I don't want that. I think it's easy to gloss over those first two verses, but there is definitely something already being introduced here, as we'll see in some coming verses. But any thoughts on that before we read the next couple?
That's pretty good.
Great.
Let's keep trucking.
3 through 5, Kyle.
All right. Chapter 4, verse 3. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. But on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor.
Yeah, great. So a couple points here that we'll discuss and toss around a little bit. But one of the things here is with Cain and his birth, we get this announcement and this description to his birth, but nothing with Abel. So in sort of human and fleshly eyes, there's this announcement for the firstborn and nothing for the secondborn. Now God enters the picture and he's receiving these offerings, and there's a lot to be said about, what made the offering better, or why are they making offerings? Where are they making offerings? There's tons of really good questions there. But the thing I want to point out is, from God's perspective, God has a lot of detail in describing Abel's offering.
Right.
And for Cain's offering, it's just some.
Yeah.
But some.
Yeah.
Right? And so...
For those Office fans, Cain had the minimal pieces of flair. Okay.
Office Space, right?
Office Space.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The Office is the television show, right. Office Space. Yeah,
Office
minimal
Space.
Pieces of flair to his offering. And what I'm trying to point out here is that juxtaposition earlier is now flipped in God's sight. Or we could put it this way, what might be great and fascinating to human eyes might mean very little to God, and what might mean very little to man might mean a lot to God. And that's like, we might think of that as a New Testament principle or something that's later in the Bible, but here it's being snuck in there in these first couple verses of Genesis 4. And that's something to pay attention to. But where this story is going is, gosh, Kyle, have you ever been faithful to God, trying to offer something to God, and felt like God wasn't there? How'd you respond to those sort of situations?
Despair.
Sure.
Anger. A lot of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
I think overall I've responded, and this is something that think I want everyone to hear, like, as you go on your walk with the Lord, there's going to be peaks and valleys. And if you don't recognize that you're in peaks and valleys, those valleys can be a lot more painful. And when you look back through different stories in the Bible, that certainly rings true. And also, what's true in all of those times is the Lord was always present. He may have been silent, but he was always present. So I guess to kind of put a bow on that little piece, over time it's gotten easier, because even if he's not speaking or if I'm not hearing, I still can come back to the promises that he made. I can stand on those, and I can continue to act properly during that season where I'm not getting the direction that I would like.
Yeah. No, that's really well put. I've been in vocational ministry my whole adult career life, and so we're going on 19 years now of being in ministry, and so, you know, my vocation has been service to the Lord, and there have certainly been peaks to that, there have certainly been valleys to that, but there have been times where it's like, I am doing everything I can to serve you, Lord, in this. I'm long nights and phone calls and right, all sorts of things I've done, and just no fruit, no sense of God's presence. I've served as an elder at a church. There's all sorts of ways that I've tried to like put my best foot forward for God, and have experienced that loneliness or the lack of God's presence, and the sense of God not really coming through on his end when I'm like, I'm giving something here, right?
Yeah.
I'm giving of myself. So where's God, and where's the fruit of that? And I think we get too easily distracted in this passage by like, what made the offering better? I think these verses are to key us into our own heart when we are Cain.
Yeah.
And I'll speak a little bit from the heart too. Growing up in kind of my teenage years through my college years, I'll admit everything came pretty easily for me. Full academic scholarship, natural athlete, especially for someone of my tiny stature, right? Like 5'8", but I could get rim, and I had quick eye-hand coordination. I was running
short kings for you younger viewers.
Yeah, short kings, right? I was running a 4.340 at age 18. So I mean, I was generally pretty good with people. Vice president of my class. A lot of things were going really easy for me. But in the last 8 years, they haven't. Nothing has come easily. My health, my finances, right? Like, relationships with others have been hard through the last 8 years. Yeah. Ministry's been hard for all sorts of reasons.
It's like a bad game of life, whack-a-mole.
Yes. And
every time you get ahead,
whack-a-mole. Whack-a-mole is like my best game at part 2. So like, even that, just really quick. And nothing has come easily. And so really, as readers of the scripture, it's so easy to get distracted. Yeah. And what made the offering better? No, I think it's what do we do in Cain's position? All right. So let's find out what Cain does in Cain's position in verses, where are we at? 6 and 7.
6 and 7, yep. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it."
Yeah. Man, there's so much. I actually paused there, even though I've got the notes and I'm prepared. I was like, oh, gosh.
There's a lot there.
So sin in just a chapter ago was depicted as a talking serpent and a crafty character. Yeah. And this time, we're supposed to kind of bring that with us to now. We've got sin crouching outside a door, waiting to pounce on you. And Cain is already upset. And I'm sure, as all of us can attest to, when we're already down in the dumps, sin is just that much easier to fall into and to make mistakes and lash out in every direction. And yet, even though that's apparent, the thing that I really love about this is Cain didn't pray and ask for God to show up. but God's talking to him and counseling him and saying, like, hey, you're down, man. Like, but hey, if you do what's right, there's favor here for you too. Right. You can crush sin. Even though he's laying a trap for you, you can still overpower that. Even if he snatches you can snatch him back. You can wrestle him. Like, so I think that often, that's something I want to bring to the fore here too, is we're often think of Cain and the man and the woman when they eat the tree, is like, oh, what idiots. Oh, I can't believe they sinned and brought all this on us.
They ruined all this.
We really got to put ourselves in this scenario and see not only us in Cain's shoes, but also see God unprompted came and counseled him. Unprompted. Cain wasn't even asking for it. And God graciously comes in, gives a picture of what sin looks like, assures him, you can conquer this, right? Like, it's crouching on your door, but you can conquer this. So I think that the test here isn't like, can you make the right or wrong decisions with your offering the next time? The test is this inner test of knowing that sin is at the door, but God's right there too.
Right.
Thoughts on that, Kyle? Any reflections coming to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, like you said, putting ourselves into Cain's shoes there, and continuing to be alert to the realities. What else? I had something else on that. But I think we'll park it there for that.
Yeah, sure.
There's lots there. There's a lot, and coming back to kind of the intro to this this podcast episode. This is the foundational stuff. So we'll speed some things up, but if there's a good time to stop and really lay some groundwork and a proper foundation, now's the time we want to do that.
Yeah, especially this part here, because I think most of us, I don't want to assume, but I think it's a fair assumption, we've got a sin that's always crouching at our door. We've got a sin that we actually open the door and say, come on in. This is a good time, like to do some sinning. Yeah. Right? We all have that thing or those things, and it can be easy to depict God as far away in those moments. And here, in this second example, right? Yeah, we have a first example of sin, but here's the second example, and God isn't distant. He's right there. Yeah. Right there, assuring us. And so, I'm with you, Kyle. This would be a great time to pause the podcast, to pause the video, and actually do some soul searching. And make some prayers to God.
Well,
like,
and
where
on that,
are you in this?
Yeah, where are you, God, in this? But also think about, right? If you've been on this journey for any amount of time, you've probably heard the idea of the sin that so easily ensnares us, right? And it's those things that are our own natural bent towards sin. Whether that's addiction or lust or whatever it is. And I think this is a good reminder of, even beyond that, what are the things that we're more likely to do when we're in a different state of mind, right? And again, to take that as tactical, practical as we can. When we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're upset, we need to have that awareness. And I think in this case, the Lord shows up in a big way for Cain, and he can do that for us, but we also need to be cognizant and have those kind of subsystems running of, hey, I know what I'm walking into. I know what I'm feeling. I know what I'm up against today. How do I put some safeguards in place, right? If I'm going to go into my house, right, and all I have is junk there and I'm going to overeat, right? Or, insert XYZ sin here, right? How can I protect myself from that, right? Is there a mentor I can just pick up the phone and call, right? Is there a scripture I need to go back to and meditate on, right? Even just creating an environment that is going to protect you from those things. I think having that level of awareness is really going to help us to prevent some of those bumps along the way that will then only hinder, right? It's not going to stop, but can hinder us from getting back on that walk that we all want to be on. So anytime we can avoid that whole shame pattern, which
there's a lot to be said there.
We want to get rid of that, right? But certainly as you grow, these are things you can do proactively to make your life better, to avoid some of those bumps and bruises along the way.
Yep. Yeah, and again, I appreciate where we're going with this, because it's so easy to look at this and ask questions about the offering, or, oh my gosh, Cain murdered his brother, which, sorry, spoiler alert, if you didn't know.
Surprise!
And yet here, isn't this such a great moment that, like, the loving, caring, assuring voice of God is just one step of intentionality and awareness away.
Yeah.
Like, or even just some of those intentional, like, surrounding of yourself of certain things, of scriptures and safeguards and mentors.
Right.
Like, God is close. We could end the podcast here with just, hey, God is close when you're in your sin.
Yeah. Wow.
And we could end it here. We've got a little more to cover, but it's having eyes to see a different narrative than the one that we often hear with these very popular verses. That was one of our hearts in even starting this podcast is let's take the Sunday school lessons and give new light on them and renewed light on them. And here's one of them right now.
Right.
Is we could take a passage at this and be like, I can't believe Cain murdered his brother. I can't believe there's better offerings and worse offerings that we can present to God or something. That stuff is easy to get lost in.
Yeah.
And it's easy to lose how close God is right in the midst of Cain's temptation and sin.
Yep.
And what a good promise that is for us as well. So, yeah. Let's get into...
Excellent. What's next?
We've got a longer passage here, so stick with us. 8 to 14.
Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Oh my.
Oh geez.
Then the Lord said to Cain, where's your brother Abel? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. Mm-hmm. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me.
Mm. Oh man, again, there's like a million things I really want to dig into here, but I want to draw us again to noticing here. So Cain had God guiding him through his anger, through being downcast about the whole offering and favor thing. And what does Cain do? He drags his brother out in the field, tricks him into it, however you want to picture it.
Look, something shiny. Thunk!
Right.
Game over.
And we have to keep bringing ourselves back to the context here. Cain was the favored son. Cain was the firstborn son. Cain might have even been imagined as being this snake crusher from Genesis 3 that was going to be bruised in the heel but crush the head of the snake. And instead, he's depicting as crushing the head of his brother, of killing his brother. So
there's a juxtaposition for you.
Right. And we've gone now from just eating the wrong piece of fruit to murdering your brother in one generation. So the depth and the breadth and the severity of sin is accelerating at phenomenal rates. And God's presence continues to be depicted as steady and even interrupting, trying to get in the way or trying to comfort. And yet us as humans are continually being depicted as like worsening and drawing away from God. And God would have like every single right to be able to say, Cain, you deserve justice here. Off with your head as well, right? And we could point to the laws coming up in Moses here, in books to come.
Mm-hmm.
We could point to modern day society in America right here, right now, where there's certain states in this nation.
He's getting the needle.
That's right.
Game over for Cain.
He's done because of what he's done to Abel. But I really want to walk through briefly but deeply what God does here. He depicts Cain as sowing the seeds of spilled blood into the soil. Mm. And so he says, okay, when you go to plant food, you're not going to get anything because this is what you've planted. You've planted your brother's blood into the soil, so you're going to reap that now. You're going to reap nothing. You're going to reap death, basically.
Right.
And I'm going to exile you and wander. Why? Because you haven't stewarded the garden I've given you. You're not worthy of it. Which, this should harken back to Genesis 1, 2, and 3, right? It's God's not doing anything new or drastic or different. God is not like shifting shadows we read in. This is another Hebrews allusion that we're making today, right? He's consistent. He is loving. He is enduring. And even when Cain, this is mind-boggling to me. Cain goes, my punishment is more than I can bear. What about the death of your brother? What about that part? Why isn't that the part you can't bear, right? So Cain still isn't getting it.
Right.
God still gives him grace and says, I'm going to protect you from death.
Wow.
That makes no sense. To have that level of grace and compassion on someone that just killed their brother and regrets the punishment of it rather than the death of his brother.
Right. Yeah. And anyone with young children will certainly find many commonalities there. Yes. But.
Yeah. Well, what about this? And what about this injustice? This isn't fair. Both my kids have learned that one now. This isn't fair. Oh boy. Right? And yet, hopefully you can see how self-absorbed Cain is, right? Am I my brother's keeper? No, you're his brother.
Right.
You're not his guard.
Right.
No, you're his brother. You're well beyond brother's keeper at this point. You're his brother. And so the fact that, I'm getting frustrated at Cain, and God is compassionate and gracious while still delivering justice.
Sure.
Still delivering punishment and even a curse, right? But I think the grace and the compassion that God has for Cain is missed.
It's interesting. Let's talk about, even just for a minute, the dichotomies, and this is going a little bit deep, try and track with me. Mm-hmm. The dichotomies here of the grace and the curse and how that plays out through the entirety of the Bible. And it's a huge piece, and I feel like people really swing to one side of that, grace versus works debate, if you will.
Right.
But I think this is just one thing that has made me highlight of all the examples of this through the Bible, that God is on a different plane when it comes to these things. There is no this or that. Right. It's an and. God can handle the nuance and the difference between both the realities of judgment and the realities of his love.
That's right.
And that's a tough concept, but I think one that's worth grappling with internally and with the Lord and with other individuals. I think that's a very, that can be a pivotal topic in many folks' walks, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah. I'm not typically the practical example guy, but I'll be it for a second. So I've got a 9 and a 4-year-old, and our discipline of them is sitting them on the step for timeout to think about what they did or didn't do, right? And then we come over to our children and ask them, what did you do? What have you thought about while you've been on the step? The conversation between the 4-year-old is different than the conversation with the 9-year-old. But one of the practices, because of what you just said, and even chapters like this where I'm meditating on how God handled disciplining Cain, is when the child is done and we're talking through that, they say, I'm sorry, and I embrace them and say, I forgive you, and we hug it out a little bit, and And then the child goes back to what normally it's dinner.
Right.
Gets back to the dinner table. And I have made a point of remaining at the step to picture myself on the step, hearing what I just said to myself as a kid, right? And then offering that moment to God of saying, what could I have done differently? What would you have done differently, God? Is there a way that I communicated both love and justice in this moment that I missed, right? And just that lingering on that step for me is like placing myself in the child's punishment, if you will, rather than my child receiving all the punishment.
Right.
It's me saying, I don't know if I did this right. I'll offer this too. Was there something that I did to set up my kid for failure that put them on the step, and it's really my fault? Should I be the one sitting on the step?
If you think parenting is just about teaching your children, you've missed the key part of parenting.
Parenting is a mirror unlike any other mirror.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. If there was an anti-Instagram filter, that's what we're talking about here. Right? It's going to magnify your flaws in a powerful way.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So if someone was come up with that filter, let us know, tag us. It'll be fun.
Oh my gosh. I saw an Instagram reel that said, my husband caught our child saying mama for the first time, but with this unfortunate filter, and it was a zombie filter. Yes. And so the girl's like, mama. It's like the anti-Instagram filter of this amazing moment. This bottle it up and remember it and cherish it forever. But
social
it had a filter
fail.
on.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. For lack of a transition, did we read 15 and 16 with
no,
that?
No, we didn't.
Okay, let's read that because I think I already alluded to it. Yep.
Because this is the last of our
we'll wrap
chapter
up
4 section here. Okay. Chapter 15, or verse 15 rather. But the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone kills Cain, he will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a distracting question here of like, what was the mark? And there have been some good theological conclusions I've come across, but also some really bad theological conclusions that I've come across.
Interesting.
We'll leave that one go because I think the point here is one that I already emphasized, is that when it could be off with your head, God is protecting and bringing grace and compassion and second chances.
Right.
Here in Genesis 4, again, we've already talked about this, so we don't need to go into it, but we think of that as New Testament God stuff. But it is right here in Genesis 3, Genesis 4, Cain, and this tremendous sin. We've gone from eating the wrong food to murdering, and God's protecting the murderer.
That escalated quickly.
Right? And so we'll leave the mark at that. We don't know what the mark was. We know what it did.
Right.
And that's the important part here. The part I want to get to here is, isn't it interesting that Cain is sent to Nod, to wander, and that Hebrew word Nod actually means wandering.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and so, where was Cain before this? He was in an inner wandering. And that is the snake that he was supposed to kill. The snake that he was supposed to kill was this inner wandering of like, I'm downcast, I'm angry, my offering wasn't received as well as the second-born brother, and everything's always come easily to me, and my mom favored me, I'm the firstborn son. I should have had the better offering too. And it's that inner wandering that God now exposes to his outer wandering, right? Projects, okay, I'm going to give you another chance. And we'll surround you in an environment where you can fully grasp the wandering that was in your heart. And it'll be in your feet and in your air and in your nose right? Your wandering will now be manifest so that you can conquer that inner snake this time around.
Right. Wow.
Right? Any thoughts on that?
Oh man, so many. But overall, I think that when it comes to hardship, if there's one reality that we all share, it's hardship, and we all are going to face that in some form throughout our life, regardless of your socioeconomic status. And how we respond to that can certainly be a big part of our maturing and developing. And additionally, how we process this whole idea of finding ourselves wandering, and how do we take that and make something good out of it.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's a tricky one, because I think it's a lifelong reality.
That's right.
And how do we overcome that, and then also to drive that to something practical, understanding that, again, we need to zoom out, because in the moment, all you can see is the wandering. All you can see is nothingness. All you can see is, what you don't have. All you can focus on is the affliction, the current circumstances, when oftentimes, whether we realize it or not, God is there, and he needs us to go through this to realize what he has for us. Oftentimes, that period of time in the valley forges the tools, the intestinal fortitude, the metal that we need to truly live out our purpose. And I think that everyone listening would agree that many of the best stories, they're stories of triumph that didn't go from here to here. They went from here, through here, to here.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's a part of that process that, if there ever was something that's so human, so pivotal to our existence, this is it. So certainly something to take caution, take time to think about what this looks like in your own life, right? And potentially even look back and say, hey, what have I gone through and not had a chance to reflect on that experience, right? And let's say now you're further in your walk with the Lord than you were back then. I would invite you to even spend some quiet time and ask the Lord, hey, Lord, when I was in that valley, where were you? And I'll bet some wild stuff's going to come up in that exercise. Because it has for me.
Yep. And certainly for me too. And I've always been surprised when I do that, where I'm like, I bet it was in this. And then God will like come in through a side door. It's like, oh, no, it was there. Oh, right. Yeah, I guess it was there.
This comes in like the Kool-Aid man.
Well, yeah, I guess I didn't need that wall anyway, God. That's amazing.
What was the line again? What did you say when you... Oh, yeah. It was that, oh, yeah.
There it is, yeah. I saw the cartoon of it in my head better than the voice for some reason.
That's going to resonate for some of you.
Yeah. Our age and older.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's something so good in this passage that relates to us that, again, can be missed when we just focus on, like, oh my gosh, sin is getting so bad, and there's murder, and why would God, see favor on one offering and not another? Man, the theme continues to be that God has care for us, is there in the midst of our sin, and then even after our sin is doling out the consequences and the curses. I don't want to be pictured as dodging that. There's some very real consequences to our sin, and God spells them out.
Right.
He's pretty explicit with that.
Right.
And yet is somehow gracious and compassionate with this brat that just killed his brother.
Right.
He's being a brat still after murdering his brother. And there's grace there for him, and second chances, and endurance and perseverance that God is showing towards Cain. And so I'm going to bring up a few key points here. If you have anything else you're stewing on, you can prepare yourself to say some more, and then I'll close this out. But hopefully you can see in this passage that we are also invited to conquer the inner snake in us, right? There's this snake that is tempting us with thinking about God in ways that he's not.
Right.
And this snake is also crouching at our door, ready to pounce on us, and God has given us the tools, has given us his presence, has given us his voice, has given us friends and mentors and scriptures to be able to say, even if sin pounces on us, we have what it takes to not be angry, to not be downcast, and to conquer that. But then even if we do, I think that's the miracle of this story, actually. Even if and when we succumb to sin, get tackled by it, and even enjoy it, and even are blinded by it, God is gracious and compassionate in the midst of the consequences, in the midst of the judgment. His presence carries on with us in good and gracious ways, even in the severity of it. So we've got inner snakes to conquer. And the other thing that I really want to point out as a key point from today is when it appears that God isn't there, right? Like God didn't show favor on Cain's offering. And so when it appears that he's not there, we do not need to perceive this as punishment. We do not need to see this as like something to be angry about. We can, right? And
it's a choice.
There's room for that, and God will show up in that too. But one of the keys I want to point out here is that those exact moments, and you were alluding to this very well too, those exact moments are actually training.
Yeah.
They are training for us. They are preparation for us so that we can be the ones that maybe not in a moment,
right,
but through a slow, faithful, persevering crushing of the snake inside of us, right? Those moments are the exact moments to really train to be snake crushers ourselves.
It's a well-worn idea, but that whole concept of asking the Lord for patience and finding yourself sitting at more red lights is one minor example of, hey, look, if we're going to truly grow, right, there's a reason those folks that have risen to greatness have also dealt with beyond their fair share of adversity. I think that rings true for a reason.
Yeah. Any other key takeaways for you before I close this out?
Only one. I would remind anyone listening to this that we're getting into a lot of fun stuff here, and we're breaking it down, and that's all worthwhile. That's all helpful, and I don't want to allow the opportunity to pass without saying this content, right, to use a modern day term, this content in the Bible, the Word, is still ever relevant in a world that has told you it's culturally insignificant, it lacks authority, the translations can't be listen, whatever it is, I would just encourage you to get into the Word, ask the Lord for wisdom, read it, find some really good mentors to dig through this, and I think you'll be amazed at what it can actually do for your life, and that you don't need anyone other than yourself and some time to dig into this, because there's wisdom that's certainly applicable, as you've seen today, in our modern life. There's a lot of cultural nuance. We can help with that. There's some resources to help with that. But at the end of the day, the same thing's happening, like we highlighted with strife between family members. That still happens today, doesn't it?
Yeah, believe it or not.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, really good point, and we sincerely hope to be a refreshing place of that sort of biblical reading, where the biblical reading goes beyond just heady theology, which I love. I'll self-disclose that I love that. I love the thinking and the research and all that, but hopefully it's this podcast can be one of those refreshing places that says, oh, I didn't think that Genesis 4 would matter to how I go about when God feels distant.
Right.
Like, that's not a typical question that comes out of Genesis 4, right? But that's the point that I hear you making, is like, keep reading and looking for these nuances and these questions that go beyond the surface reading or Sunday school upbringing, or maybe the the contradictions or, you know, the points that other people have brought up. Well, okay, yeah, those things are there. There's answers to them, but please do have your own time to read and think and discuss.
It's approachable, you know. Yeah, if this was a finance podcast, this is the part where I'd say, now just remember, do your own research, right? So, but again, yeah, make sure that you know, if this is a video game, you know, beyond just the characters that you're witnessing, you're the main character in this story. So make sure that you're crafting a story worth watching.
That's right. Yeah, and we hope this encourages you to do just that. So with that, here's an invitation. May you know that when favor is lost, your training is found, and that just on the other side of patience and perseverance is that favor that God has for you. Thanks for listening to the Invitation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, kindly invite others. See what I did there, Kyle? To listen in by sharing it with a friend, posting about it on social media, or even leaving a rating and a review.
To catch all the latest and greatest, give us a follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X at The Invitation Pod, and help us share the invitation with others. Thanks again. We hope you'll tune in to future episodes.